Friends, welcome to another episode of Blossoms and Bourbon. My name is Mark, and I'm excited to have you here again in my workshop here at Creative Occasions. Tonight we are going to talk about armatures and how to use armatures in one aspect of floral design. And we're going to actually be tasting during the bourbon segment a Japanese whiskey. So that's going to be fun. I know you aren't going to want to miss that. An armature is actually a structure that you create which becomes a part of the floral design, and it can either offer physical support in the design, or it can just be perceived support. Very much like you would have a trellis in your yard, and you put a plant in the yard in front of the trellis, and you train the plant to grow up it. That's the physical support for that plant. And that's very much how an armature would act in a floral arrangement. The one we're doing tonight is going to be just a perceived structural element. It's just really there for looks, but I hope that you'll like it. So starting out, armatures are typically made with natural materials. So we're going to start out with this beautiful foraged red dogwood. Thank you, Anita. She brought this into the shop to me. And basically we're going to take this bind wire, which is just really a paper-coated wire, great for all kinds of applications, made by the Smithers Oasis company. And we're gonna tip here as you're making these together. You notice how smooth and round this is? And when you try to lash these two together, they're gonna roll and they're gonna move around. A little tip or a trick to keep that from happening is you cut just a little notch in the branch, and then we're gonna very carefully cut another little notch in this one. It's a good thing I'm wearing my bifocal contacts. All right, and so then when you put those together and you put the bind wire around it, and we're gonna tie it together, it's gonna be a much more secure joint. It's not gonna have the tendency to slide and move like it might otherwise. So just keep that in mind, especially if you're working with a material like this red dogwood that's nice and smooth. Cut those little notches in there. Nobody will ever see them when you get that lashed together. All right, so now this is gonna be like the cooking shows where I just put that into the oven, and now I'm gonna pull this one out that's all nice and ready, okay? So I have one more piece of the armature that I wanna put in place here for you. I did use a utility container with foam in it for this. I wanted the armature to be nice and secure in the foam. But the pot that I really wanted to use, the container, is this beautiful sort of hand-thrown looking, very natural clay pot, but it has a hole in it because it's designed for plants. I wanted to use that for a fresh arrangement, so obviously I had to come up with some other device, some other way to make it so that it wouldn't leak everywhere. So that's why I'm using this little utility container, which holds water very nicely and won't leak everywhere. All right, get that twisted in place. I do also like the fact that, I was talking to Jason about this earlier, I like designs that have physical height to them. I think that's really an interesting way to kind of increase the perceived value of an arrangement. And so I love these little natural tendrils that are at the tops of these branches. They're just kind of sticking up there. All right, so now this, we're just gonna slip right down in there. 1, 2, 3, there we go. All right, so now let's do some flowers. I have noticed something that I've been doing with these arrangements, and I don't know if you picked up on that or not, but when I'm talking about a particular style of arrangement or something, I tend to use a very monochromatic, very kind of mutually matching color scheme, almost the same colors. And I think part of the reason I do that is so that you are able to focus on the style and not the colors. If I were using a lot of mixed colors in these arrangements, I think it might be your focus would quickly turn to the color rather than to the style of the arrangement. So while we're talking about style, I'm going to keep the colors kind of simple. That doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. I know in parallels I used all purples and greens. This one is purples and greens today. It happens to be a favorite of mine. But we'll actually do episodes that are based on color theory and how to mix colors and use colors in flower arrangements. So don't be too disparaged by the fact that you think that I only like one color, okay? This material I love. It's called Safari Sunset. It's actually a tropical flower, and it just kind of blends right into the branch of the armature that we're using. Remember to strip those leaves off so you don't get leaves down below your water line. And already you can see that this is very much like a trellis would be in your yard. You know, it kind of looks like it's protecting the floral material. In this case, it's simply a perceived kind of structure, but it adds a lot of interest to the arrangement. All right. Because it is the season for iris, we're gonna have to have some iris in here. And one thing that I'll also do, just to spin that around and just kind of show you where it's headed, is we're gonna work inside the armature, but then we're also gonna come outside it too, just as a way to kind of break that up and visually make it a little more interesting for the viewer to look at. I was careful about the cut on that one because I wanted to use this also in the design. So don't always just assume that you have to throw all that foliage away. That's going to be a nice element of that. All right, let's go for tulips next. With the exception of the Safari Sunset, I am doing all the flowers in groups of 3 tonight. And they are all kind of being grouped together. Again, one of those techniques that I really, really like. And as I've said before, the reason I like that so much is it calls attention to the individual shapes of the flowers. You pay attention to the shape of the iris because they're grouped together. You pay attention to these tulips because they're all grouped together. All right, I'm gonna have to go through here to get to this one. Does this remind you, this particular style using this trellis, this armature, of any other style that we've done? Maybe the vertical design where everything was within the parameters of the container. It all stayed within that shape and within the dimensions of the container. It is very similar. But with this one, we've just added the shape of the armature and the structure. Kind of fun. These are beautiful. This is a cremone, which is in the Chrysanthemum family. And I'm going in low with those. And part of the reason I'm doing that is to give this some visual weight so that there is the sense of stability with the arrangement at the front. You have this nice mass here at the focal point, and that gives the whole arrangement some stability. It feels like it's nice and stable. It's not going to fall over. Okay. All right, let's get one more of those in there because I promised 3s of everything. We'll work that one a little bit behind too. All right. Now, I also brought, just to kind of keep this a little more organic feeling, a little more natural, just as though you would see this armature or this trellis out in nature, I brought some English ivy. And so what we're gonna do with the ivy, just kind of twist it through the trellis or the armature. So you do have that sense of it being very natural. And in this case, the armature is structural. It is supporting the ivy. The ivy is not actually just kind of free flowing and loose on its own, but it's being supported by the structure. The nice thing about that is you can just twist it through there. You don't even have to tie it in. It just naturally sort of stays in place. Now I think I'm gonna make this not a vertical arrangement. We're gonna make this ivy kind of sweep over the side of the container, and it's gonna kind of open up visually the line outside of there. All right. Let's put a little bit of this Dianthus in there too to kind of hide the mechanics. We've used this before. It's a great product. It's part of the Dianthus family called Green Trick. I guess because it's just a trick for you to think that it's an actual flower. You know, I really hope, I've had so many of you who've actually sent me pictures of things that you've been doing as you've been watching the videos. So I hope that you'll continue to do that, and please share them here. If you have a question or an issue that's come up, please let me know. I would love to get back to you about that and, you know, try to figure out what the issue might be. But I do love hearing from you guys, and I appreciate that so much, that you take the time to send me pictures and let me know how your work is going. It is, and I know that you know I feel this way, it's super important to keep flowers in your life each and every day. So I love that you guys are working at it out there. All right, one of my favorite ways to cover mechanics is good old sheet moss. And the sheet moss, again in this application, looks great because of the texture of this pot, this container. It's so beautiful and really looks like it just belongs right outside. And you may remember me talking about the hairpins that you can sometimes use to keep this in place. Again, I don't think with this application we're going to need that, but that's certainly something that can be done. All right, so let me stare before I let you see the finished look here. I do kind of like that. Armatures in floral design. That's super fun. That would be a great kind of spring arrangement to send someone just to wish them a get well, or just to make for yourself and keep in your own home. So I hope that you enjoyed that, and I hope that you'll give it a whirl. Next up is the bourbon. Today we're going to be tasting a Japanese bourbon. It's from the Suntory Whiskey Company, and Jason and I were talking about this earlier. It is called whiskey for two reasons. One, the mash bill and the actual recipe that's used to make it. Number two, it's not distilled and manufactured in the United States. In order for something to be called bourbon, it has to be manufactured in the United States, and it has to be at least 51% corn in its recipe. So anything else, so actually here's the way to think about that. All bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskeys are bourbons. This one is Suntory Whiskey. This company was founded in 1923, so it's actually a very old company. And one of the things I found interesting as I was doing some reading about it is that the founder of the company, when he was 13, finished his formal education. His formal education was in chemistry, and he started to do an internship in a pharmaceutical wholesaler. And the pharmaceutical wholesaler was inventorying liquors and distilled products that had been imported from the West. So his first experience with whiskey of any kind was Scotch, and the Scotch whiskeys. And so he was inspired by that, but he wanted to, you know, put his own twist on it and give a different flavor to it. So this actual Toki whiskey is a blended whiskey. It's blended from 3 different distillers in Japan. And so let's give it a whirl. You can see that the coloration is a lot lighter than some of the other distilled products that we've tried. And it is an aged product, so it's aged in a cask. I don't know the stipulations about whether or not the cask have to be charred or toasted or any of those kind of things that American manufacturers are getting into right now. But this one is a much lighter looking product. And let's talk about the glass for just a second. This glass, the shape of it, is specifically designed for this purpose, for nosing and for tasting bourbon. So on the nose first. And remember, mouth open just a little bit. Also, something else I learned on a recent trip to Kentucky. The guy there said, when you're gonna taste a bourbon, excuse me, you should always just have the first taste to get your mouth to go, oh gosh, alcohol, and be ready for the fact that you're going to be tasting. And so just have that first sip, perhaps have a sip of water after that, and then you'll be ready for the first taste. Yeah, it's funny, there's a little like honey flavor, and it seems very bright. It's one of those that kind of opens up on the back of your tongue just a bit, and there's a little bit of a citrus note, or definitely like a fruit, like green apple, something that's bright. Yeah, it's really very good, but it is a very different kind of product than some of the American bourbons that we've been tasting. It's very good. It's very bright. Maybe this would be your summertime drink instead of the darker bourbons that you would favor in the winter or something. But anyway, it's delicious. I hope that you'll feel free to give it a try. You are able to find this locally in your local ABC store and liquor suppliers. I got this bottle in Kentucky, actually. So I guess that's going to about wrap up what we do in this episode. As always, I'm so incredibly grateful that you've decided to spend your time here. I hope that you'll give Armatures a try, and I hope that you'll give Toki a try. So until next time, cheers to all things flowers. See you again soon at Blossoms and Bourbon. Take care.